Today, 3D printing is going to help me create more storage here in the workshop. So I have 4 of these shelving units here in the workshop, and I've had them, gosh, going on 20 some odd years. Recently, I had a welder add wheels to them so that they can move around, and that's proven to be incredibly useful. A few years ago, I built this mounting structure in here that helps hold some of my camera gear. But I need more, I need to optimize my space utilization. And what happens is these shelves are pretty far apart. And what I'd really like to do is do kind of what I did here and add more shelves in between. Now I had an extra set of these center metal brackets. Actually, let me bring you closer so I can show you what I'm dealing with. So these metal shelves are made up of these vertical structures and some thick shelving supports here and on the top and on the bottom. And then in the middle, they have these, whoops, there we go, smaller metal posts, as you can see, that support looks like a 3/8 inch piece of MDF. Put this back for a second. And it turns out that out of all of these, I did have one spare set of these cross braces, which I put this shelf in here, and I use it to support smaller pieces of material. But I only had one of these, and I really like this idea. I want to put more shelves in because this whole area is dead space. Yes, I know this is also really unorganized, and that's part of the challenge, is I want to get this stuff organized. And there's also relative dead space up here, and there's probably 4 other shelves, 4 other zones of the 4 big shelving units that I could add more space to. So I decided I was going to 3D print some supports and use some plywood across here to make it happen. So the idea was, my initial thought is, did I want to deal with thinner MDF and make some kind of long, thick wood support across it? Or did I want to use 3D printing? And I mean, come on, 3D printing is going to be the solution. What I'm going to do is show you how I built these little support units in Tinkercad and 3D printed them, and how they will support three-quarter-inch plywood shelves and give me more shelf space. Let's take a look at that. In this case, the design included the shape that fits around the upward post, a place where the screw goes in, and a place for a captive nut. So you can see the nut here, and all I did, come on, there we go. All I did with this is I went down to the shapes and I chose a polygon. And one of the things you can do in a polygon is tell it how many sides you want. So I made sure that, like my nut, I had a 6-sided polygon, which it turns out is the default. And then I just measured the polygon to make sure it was the right size. Then I went in and I sort of created a space for this captive nut. Now let's spin around here for a second and you can kind of see it if I deconstruct it a little bit. Here is the nut, and as you can see, it's what's called a hole in Tinkercad, and it just slides in, and what that does is it means that when you put the screw in or you put the bolt in, the nut won't spin, so it creates the space for the nut. So the final version of this required both a left and right facing version of these brackets that just slot in here and get tightened up, and the same on that side. So let's deconstruct these a little bit as well. Okay, so this is the actual inside of the unit. You can see there's a place where the nut goes in. And if I take this part out again, you can see it a little better. Here's where the nut goes through, and here's where the nut lives. So I needed a piece in here that would grab the nut and make sure it was there, but also allowed it to pass through. And so you can see what I did is I just took this same nut hole, which doesn't sound very good, but is really relatively accurate, and I just reproduced the nut repeatedly to allow the nut to slide into the space. and then I filled it in. And that way, what happens is you've got basically a nut going through. See a little better here. You've got the nut going through, and then it just fills in. And then to make sure that the whole space was filled in, I brought this piece up and just filled that in. And you can see too here, here's the end corner piece. Let's ungroup this. And you can see that the corner was essentially made out of a couple of rectangles and a circle, and that's how I got my corner. And the process in doing these 3D printing projects is to just build up piece after piece after piece. So we can come back in here again and we'll explode this model. And you can see how some of these parts are coming together. And then I'm using, I used a negative version of the circle. So I put the circle, or the cylinder, if you want to call it, in one of these holes. And I used it to subtract out to create a negative. So let me show you how I do that with one of these. So let's grab a box. And let's scale up the box a bit and scale it out. And then if I take this, let's bring this down so you can see the top of it. If I take something like this here, when I group both pieces together, you can see that I create this negative space. And then if I want to trim another box to get the effect I want, let's move this out a bit and change its color. Let's make it yellow. If I turn this into a hole and then group it and I put it up against the box, there we go. And then I group these two, you can see I get the hole, I get the curve, and I also get a little tag out the back. And if you get something like a tag out the back, that's when I used extra boxes to just trim down those tags or any extra space, and I group those in, and that trims it out. So to hold my 4 new shelves, I made a total of 16 of these brackets. 8 of them were left side brackets and 8 of them were right side brackets. And there we go. And I've just added another chunk of storage into the workshop. And I'm making 4 of these, so I'll have 4 times this amount of new storage here available. And as you can see, it's very easy to move them up and down. If I want to move this down one, I just loosen it with the Allen wrench and drop it down. The nice thing is that because this is 3/4 inch, there's plenty of support here with the wood itself, and so the edge supports hold it nice and securely, and then the wood holds it nicely and secure, so I don't need this metal cross brace anymore. So for ZDNet's DIY IT, my name is David Gortz. What this shows you is how you can combine 3D printing and some basic wood and optimize your storage in new and helpful ways. So go out there and make something cool. So it's a few days later, and I'm doing this without a microphone right now, but I wanted to show you that I've adjusted these 3 shelves so that they're exactly perfect for the bins and for flats. And I use the wider version of the 3D printed holders to support these things, to exactly size them to these bins.